Hello and welcome back. So in this video, I'm just going to continue kind of doing what I did in the first one, but with the intention of tuning in a little bit more to the relative value issue. Kind of, if you look at this drawing, you'll notice that everything has a kind of a monotone quality to it, right? No real darks, no real brights, except for the white of the paper, of course. So I just kind of held the pencil out there because I'm showing you that I'm moving to a 4B on the drawing, 4B pencil. So what I'm doing there is doing the parallel hatches, and I'm just running my finger when I have the ruler there, just running my finger over it just a little bit, just to kind of blend. But again, don't do that in a way that you're blending away those marks. Just do it to kind of integrate them into the drawing. I like using that term instead of blending. Idea of an integration, kind of the marks becoming part of the drawing, but not losing their their sense of individuality. Now see how I'm using the straight edge as a way to guard a particular edge, and then I'll use it. When I do my parallel hatches, the parallel hatches will hit the ruler, and so it's guarding a particular edge when I'm laying down a set of parallel hatches. Kind of lay the ruler next to the edge that I happen to be right there. Maybe I'll do it there now. I guess not, but I erased away there relative to the ruler, and you know that from there. You see how I'm kind of using that ruler, kind of putting in a series of parallel hatches there, but using the ruler to stop, to protect the area I don't want those hatches to go into, right? See, I'm using the eraser there to kind of chop away, and I'll keep going back to that area because because the ruler will just keep rubbing over it and it'll dull down, right? And that's the thing, you got to kind of keep, as you develop the drawing, you got to keep pushing and pulling it, right? Because the natural tendency is for all those values to kind of gravitate to some middle value, just because you're rubbing over it as you draw. It's kind of a dark binder on that book, so I'm kind of in giving the implication of that. But notice the energy in the marks I'm making, right? I know that's hard to do when you're first learning to draw, to make beautiful kind of hatching marks. I kind of intentionally learned early on, or I've kind of focused on that early on when I was learning to draw, particularly after I started studying certain artists like Degas. Degas uses that a lot in terms of using pastel. He does these wonderful parallel hatches with pastel. So that kind of just appeared. You didn't see me do it, but see that erasure in the side of the thick book? I'm parallel hatching now with the eraser pencil, so it can do that. So I'll start working back and forth now, and I did a little bit on the top of the book, between using the eraser pencil, see those marks right there, and the pencil to create the hatching marks. So just like in the charcoal drawing, you can create use mark making with the subtraction technique, right? It's a nice kind of way to not only subtract or lighten that particular area, but you're maintaining the language. So you're not going in and erasing away the marks you've made, the dark ones. You're just going over top with new marks that are lighter. That's all, right? And then you start kind of building up density in the drawing by doing this, and that's really important. Probably one of the main culprits that I see that students run into is that the drawings tend to look thin. There's not a kind of sense of density or presence to the drawing, and i.e. by default the objects they're drawing, because they haven't learned yet how to go over and over and over and over and over the drawing. You get to one image and then you're afraid to ruin it or something, right? So it's really important. Notice I'm just kind of keep going over the same thing, endlessly, to kind of refine it over time. Now, notice it's getting darker, right? The midtones, the dark values are starting to ramp up a little bit. So and I'm being pretty, I'm spending a lot of time in the book and the objects and stuff. I haven't gone back into the background too much, but it's just a white piece of paper essentially, so there's not a lot of action going on back there. I'll probably address that, I think, in this video or the next one. I'll probably play with that a little bit more. But right now, just trying to get a sense of value, relative value built up here that kind of makes me happy in terms of what I'm seeing in the actual objects. By the way, you've been sending photographs to me of the object you're looking at, which is nice. I'll continue doing that. But make sure you draw from the actual object. I debated, and I have done in the past, use photograph because I have to, light this scene when I document it, right? So I have to be really controlled with that. So it's hard to look at, set up a still life and have a really controlled lighting on this piece of paper I'm drawing on at the same time. So I've debated using photographs, and I have in the past, but there's nothing like drawing from real life. There's just so much more information that you gain by looking at the real object. It's remarkable. Because I haven't drawn from a photograph in a long time, and this, teaching this way has kind of made me rethink that. But, when I do, I just realize that the photo lacks so much information that the real life object does, not to mention what the lenses do. They kind of distort the picture. So look at the rock. See how I'm geometricizing that? It's a pretty, there's a lot of kind of planier stuff going on in that rock anyways. But, that's the way you kind of tackle. We talked about that in terms of the shoe. Think about the planes that are involved. Even those soft organic objects like a shoe have certain planes and angularity that you need to document. A rock too, right? So you get that first, then you soften it up. You make it more organic if you need to. So just starting to, get a little sense of detail, right? And the thickness of the binder, the books, and the cardboard that makes up the thickness of the cover of the books. So there's that shadow. That's a pretty. I'm kind of trying to figure out what the angle of that shadow is coming at me. Cutting out the negative space against the ball and the shadow. See that little triangular light area adjacent to them. So you think negative and positive when you draw. That's the only way to kind of see the world and see it in terms of. Form, the thing in the background, right? Figure and ground, they call it. Figure being the object, the thing. It doesn't mean a human figure, and the ground being the area around it. And obviously the ground can take on a certain shape, as I outlined at the beginning. So I'm just kind of raking a series of lines across the entire rock just to unify the whole thing, right? So those parallel hatches are really interesting way to make a drawing. I typically don't do that with graphite. I use the kind of scribble technique, which we'll talk about later. But it is kind of fun to get back to this way of drawing, which I hadn't really done in a long time, of using these parallel crosshatch techniques to build up density and value and energy as well. Now, there I'm kind of, pulling away, putting a little bit of highlight on the top of the book. Here I kind of went at a random angle. It's okay to do that every now and then. If you do that too much, the whole thing gets kind of a little bit too chaotic. But in terms of the parallel hatches, so just kind of growing the drawing by doing the same thing, that I did at the very beginning. I'm just kind of building it up from the bottom up, kind of, right? And just kind of applying layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. We don't see that in a finished drawing, right? Nobody's kind of aware of that, except for if you understand this notion of presence or density to a drawing. But generally speaking, you just see the image and you think, oh, it just happened that way. No, it takes a lot of work, a lot of kind of build up over a long period of time. And getting the drawing right kind of as much as you can with that visual measurement and angle approximation is really important. Then you can kind of just slowly build the drawing and bring it into being. And it's a lot, there's a lot of information in the world, right? So, this drawing is a 3, 4, 5 hour drawing. I will get nowhere near, what it would be if it was a 20-hour drawing, which is conceivable. I won't be able to get as much information in the drawing as I would in a longer drawing. So Okay, we're getting down to the end of this one, so we'll move to the next one. Thank you.